All right, January 3rd, 2022, new year, 3 o'clock, Newcastle-Damariscotta Broadband Committee meeting. We've received the RFIs. You guys have had a lot of good conversation between the Axiom model and Tidewater model. I don't know if we want to open it up to a free forum of everybody just go around and say their piece as to their initial thoughts. We want to start. Anybody want to start us off?
Or do we just jump in and see where we're at this point?
Yeah, whichever way you guys want to approach it.
So is there a model where we just wire those people who are unserved and hold on a bigger model for later?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I asked, I believe I asked something similar to Mark when he was talking to the Nobleboro people about something like that. And he seemed to term it a Frankenstein collection of wiring the town up with different pieces. So I would have to defer to Mary Ellen if you've got any ideas of other places that have done something similar like that.
Well, the whole Frankenstein thing is something that's probably going to be in our future as things evolve. But I would say for Westport decided, the committee was looking at fibering and doing the same thing you guys are doing, but then they looked at figuring out how to serve those 200 unserved places, and they went with that. They went with Spectrum, and though they did originally so they're getting 200 houses done, and that was what they thought they could bite off and actually get approved by the town. So again, they did get a Connect Me grant. They turned that back because it was asking for too much data. So Spectrum is building out at their costs, along with a little bit of ARPA money, like $50,000 or something. So there are some towns that, even though you've looked at this, right, for all this time, you guys have been looking at these different things, they've chosen only to go with the unserved, underserved, and get that done. So I don't know whether that's we've all had this goal of getting to every house. So
that brings up the problem of Spectrum has got certain parts of towns not served. LCI has got fiber optic cables in quite a bit of the town, but there's big gaps too, I think, in their service. So how do you who do you deal with? You got to deal with one company or the other, so I don't know what the answer there would be. It would seem that I think up to this point we'd all been assuming it would either be Spectrum or LCI, but municipal model that Steve has been promoting, kind of adds a whole nother wrinkle into it. If they go ahead, they're going to have to put their own cable all over town, somehow or another. I don't know how that works.
Hey, Tom, just to clarify your suggestion, were you suggesting I don't consider Spectrum still in the discussion. So were you suggesting either LCI or Axiom, or were you suggesting one or the other for just the unserved?
Well, for just the unserved, I was thinking we would go with LCI just because they're here and they've got cable at least to poles nearby, and thus, it seems something we can bite off. And somebody, maybe as Mary Ellen said, that's what Westport said too, is we can at least get that done, and it's not hugely controversial. To me, this community network makes some sense, but I think it's going to take a lot of selling and a lot of deeper diving than I've been able to go to at this point. So that's my suggestion, is let's help the people who got nothing, like those folks out on Milliken Island Road, and get that done, and then worry about the rest of the two towns later. But that's just my thought.
Interesting.
But if LCI is willing to just replace their whole infrastructure with fiber, why would that not be helpful in the process if they're willing to help get the grants to upgrade everything? I just don't see why we would separate necessarily if it improves the whole system.
Right. And to add on that, I think the Treasury Department, which is behind a lot of the money out there right now, issued some clarifications in June last year that suggested that, if you have a project where you are going to improve service to currently unserved addresses, that it's okay to have part of that project upgrading service to currently served addresses, and you still get access to the funding pool for that. And it just seems to me that right now in America, the political will, the money, and the backing is there from both the state and the federal government to advance, this aspect of our infrastructure. And it seems like we'd be, I don't know, are we missing an opportunity? Because who knows, maybe in 3 years, this isn't, we're not in the same position that we're in right now, and the money's dried up and doesn't get renewed. And then what do you do? Then you do it all yourself anyway. And if anything, the need for this is going to become more pressing as speeds and demand and such, continue to increase. And as far as, dealing with unserved, someone asked about whether, spectrum is something that we would think about for that. I don't think we should be investing in a technology that probably has a 5-year shelf life, right? Like it's clear fiber is going to be sort of the decadal technology, going out at least 1, maybe 2 decades before something supplants it. Cable
Well,
just won't be able to keep up.
They don't seem interested anyways. I mean, that's important too. We need to have a partner.
Right, and Milliken Island residents, about 26 homes, Spectrum didn't want to play at all. And I have to agree with David. I think we should go for the ice cream sundae, and then if we only get the ice cream, then we've got that. But I think we should shoot big, and then if we can't do that, then we'll whittle it back down. Because George has Spectrum, correct, George? And you would like to have some
No, I
LC.
don't, no, I don't.
everything.
I've got the DSL line with Tidewater.
Okay, the same as we do. Okay.
Yeah.
So
There is-
do we need to make a decision maybe to stop talking about Spectrum and not even be worrying about them, other than how the people in our towns are receiving Spectrum and knowing that they're at least considered served? Maybe just start knocking them out of the way, because they haven't been able to play the game. They haven't been interested. We get a bunch of propaganda, and personally, I think we should just move them off the plate.
From what we've done, Carol, from the reconnaissance that we did and the maps and the information I think we've all seen, I think if nobody's there, nobody's there. But if Spectrum's there, fiber's there as well. Tidewater is there, I should say. Tidewater is there. So I would think if the decision was to go with LCI, then we would have those folks who have Spectrum today should have somewhat access and some easy access to fiber as well.
Yeah, their costs, I mean, obviously they could stick for internet purpose, they could stick with Spectrum and deal with TV however they want to deal with it.
All right,
But-
so being one of those people, I just want to make sure that I'm not stuck with Spectrum. So if we're going to wire the town with fiber, I want my road to be wired too.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, no, I think
That's all.
that's,
Yeah, absolutely. Tom. Yeah.
Okay.
You want part of the ice cream sundae, right, Tom? I don't blame you.
Yeah.
We're
Right.
all gonna go to the party.
There we go.
I
Everybody.
mean,
get your
I'm fine with
spoon.
that, and I'm fine with not talking about Spectrum any longer. So
Yeah.
now it's just who owns the wires is the question.
Right. I will say, if we choose to own the wires, if you guys are interested in pursuing the municipal solution, then you have to think about Spectrum, not as a potential service provider, but as an adversary. Because Spectrum Charter has shown itself again and again to come out strong against municipal broadband. They see it as a threat.
Right.
They will start disinformation campaigns. They will distribute flyers. They'll put on promotional campaigns for existing customers to renew at low prices, anything to keep your subscriber base down. I'm not sure how Spectrum would react if we go forward with a contract with LCI, because LCI's price structure, frankly, is very similar to Spectrum's.
Mm.
It actually kind of mirrors Spectrum's pricing for similar levels of service. So I'm not sure that they would see LCI really as a threat to their installed base. But the municipal broadband, they would see as, you know, if they just let it go without opposition, they're going to lose 80% of their subscribers to us.
Mhm.
Hey, Steve,
Yeah.
I think we should be concerned as to how LCI is going to respond to having a municipal network in their backyard too. I
Well,
think
frankly,
they are going to
I-
react very similar.
Yeah, I agree. But the thing is, I don't look, honestly, I don't care who ends up providing it. My concern is not just providing service for the unserved, but providing service for those that can't afford it, whether they have
Mhm.
the stuff at the pole or not.
Sure.
There's a social justice component to this for me. And right now, the only option in this area, the only two options, frankly, are out of that price range. There are a lot of folks that don't get the service because they can't afford it. So if we are not going to be able to provide a cheaper service, then I think we're spinning our wheels here. I think if you go with LCI and produce a package that is similar to what you can already get, like I just signed up with LCI, it's going to cost me a couple $1,000s to do the line, and it's going to cost me, whatever, $180 a month for internet and TV, their TV package. That's about what I'm paying with Spectrum. If we get the same deal, there aren't many families in the town that don't have internet that are going to go run out and get it. So if we're not providing a cheaper service, then at least by installing the threat of the municipal broadband, bringing the spectrum up in negotiations, maybe we can bring LCI down. Maybe it gives us some leverage. But the thing about leverage is, if you make the threat and they don't change, you've got to be willing to follow through on it, or it's not a real threat. So the
Steve,
way
if I
I
could
sort of
ask a
see
couple-
this, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to ask a couple questions about your about your situation, so that we could kind of contrast it to maybe other people. And I mean, you talked about, I think in your presentation, you talked about the cost to us would anywhere from $1,200 to $2,000 for an installation. I think that was
I got
kind of
that from
your
a-
example, right? And I saw
No.
the same. I think I saw the same article you did. Now I have a pole outside my front door, and I have two accounts with DSL, and I have another pole outside the other door. It's not going to cost me $2,000 to hook up LCI fiber, is it?
Well, that depends. Do you want it through the air, or do you want it underground? And if you want it underground, do you have
Everything
conduit?
else is in the air now, so I'll just take it through the air. I mean,
Yeah.
it's fine. I mean,
Okay, well, then it won't cost $2,000, and it also depends on the distance from the house. So my hookup,
it's 100 feet.
the hookup,
It's
so
whatever.
for you, it's not going to be expensive.
Well,
there is, I
I'm
think,
saying for most. I'm assuming for most, not just for me.
There is a hookup fee that you will pay because they give you, a box and an OTC, it's called, optic something converter, and they stick that on the side of your house, and that's fairly expensive. It costs them a few $100s. I think it's, I'm paying a $310 hookup fee. I think the base fee is $100. That's just their base fee.
Okay, I'm just a little concerned that we're using $1,200 and $2,000 as everybody's example, and that's kind of scary. Because I agree,
That's
it's
not
important
that's
that-
not everybody's example. That's the average, and that's an industry number. I didn't make that up. My cost is closer to 5,000.
Well, I think we have to look specifically at our situation and not the average. I think every location is different, and I think we have to be more specific rather than use there's a lot of studies out there.
Yeah,
And I think we need to look at those.
I
We have
couldn't
to look
survey
at our
every house.
situation specifically.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My
Anyone else want-
understanding is the first 250 feet you don't pay for. So unless you do something like underground or longer than 250 feet, this is getting the fiber to the home from the pole. So if in your case, Tim, you're 100 feet, the pole's 100 feet from the road, then you wouldn't have any cost of the fiber. The installation cost, I guess the standard is 100, and depending upon what else they do for you, including wiring in your home, they're going to charge on a case-by-case basis.
And just to give you, again, focusing, again, we think we need to focus on our situation specifically. As a town, when I say our, I use the number 90, 95, I don't know what it is, less than 100 unserved homes in Newcastle. I can't speak for Damariscotta. Someone else is going to have to do that. But of those 990, 30x of them are in Milliken Island. Carol, in my location. And Carol, you can add here too. Most of those homes, other than a few, have very close pole access, and I'm assuming most are within 250 feet. So it's not going. So a third of those 100 are going to have what I might call normal installation cost, not $1,200 to $2,000 or $5,000 in Steve's case. If they just want to take it through the pole, take it over the pole, and I would assume most people would.
I think our situation though is the pole is at the end of Milliken Island on 213. So then we have to understand, is it from 213, which is where the fiber already runs past, what are they going to charge us to come down? So I think we're about 4/10 of a mile down in, and you're further than that. So that's where I think would run into, what is the cost going to be for our Milliken Island community, for example, to get fiber from the pole on 213 down to serve the homes.
Right.
I don't think, it's not just the pole in front of our house, right? It's the pole out on
I think
213.
that's going to be Tidewater's responsibility as part of
I hope,
the
yeah,
cost of running lines.
That's what-
Yep, right. Good point, Carol. And if it's not, it's that's where the discussion specifically with Tidewater comes in, and we say, okay, run that line down Milliken Island, and you've got 30 customers down there.
Right.
Well,
It's got to be worth, it's got to be worth something to them. It can't be all on us. So that's where the specific discussion / negotiation, I think, with them comes to play. And just back to Steve's point, I agree 100%. We need to make this price competitive for the folks in the other 70, as I'll call it, in Newcastle, that are, it will be more expensive for them. They're the end of the road, and they're, all that type of stuff. But that's where I think we should focus with the subsidies and the funding and the creative ways to get these people money so that we can offset some of that cost. I thought that was the idea behind all this work and all this money, to help those folks. And I think that's where the attention should be. And I can't, let me just, my final point on this subject, or this point, is I'd hate to see us embark on a municipal broadband network to achieve lower pricing for those people at the end of the road. And that's what it kind of sounds like to me in some of this discussion. So I'll stop for a minute or two.
So just 2 points. One is, in terms of pricing, the goal is to achieve lower prices across the board for everybody, but to reduce and initially, I suspect what will happen is we'll just have 1 or 2 service levels that will be high and more affordable than what is currently available. And once the bond is paid off, then the city can be really creative. It can take all low-income customers and subsidize them completely, because you're basically swimming in money after 15 years. I mean, you do have maintenance and upgrades and things you have to worry about. But if you look at the financial projections, pictures from communities that have been doing this for a decade or more, they're netting $3 to $4 million a year in some of these communities that aren't much bigger than ours. a profit, which they reinvest in the community by dropping prices even further. Like, I don't know if you looked at some of the prices on that PowerPoint presentation that I sent around, but some of those places are doing, like, there's one that's doing 10 gig symmetrical for everyone in the community for under $100. And they offer plans that are in the teens or 20s of dollars. I didn't have space to put all the plans up, but really fantastic pricing from the consumer point of view. And they're successful.
But
So-
again, I just go back to my comment earlier. I think it's hard to make those comparisons because there's a lot of good examples and there's a lot of bad examples out there too. But you don't know the situation behind all those. We've got a situation here where you got a very small unserved group, but you've got two very strong incumbents. You know,
Yeah.
most of the other ones that we've seen in Maine, they have had no other choice but then to do it themselves, because for whatever reason, the private sector didn't seem to want to get involved. So they had to do something. And I like I said in some of my communication, I commend them for doing it, but we're not in that situation, Steve. We have a different market situation here in this area.
I don't think we do. I think Maine's kind of exceptional at having such poor coverage for broadband. In most states, many, many addresses are covered not by 2 providers, but by 5 or 6. And some of those communities still are able to muster community broadband against a really fierce market, because the fact is the municipal broadband always is going to end up being like 20% cheaper than the nearest competitor. And so, you know, when you hear someone tell you that community broadband in X town only got 15% market penetration, they're lying to you. That's not true. That's almost certainly not true, because frankly, the big companies can't compete with the kind of pricing structure that a municipal run service can provide. This is what I'm not sure if that came across in the PowerPoint that I sent out, but there is a huge amount of disinformation and gaslighting going on out there, because broadband is financially, corporate wise, and politically very fraught. So there are think tanks out there dedicated to, you know, promoting municipal broadband, and there are other think tanks out there dedicated to promoting corporate interests in broadband.
So I think I'm
really
clear, sorry to interrupt, Steve. I think I'm clear on Steve and Tim's point of view. And I just want to throw my thoughts in that were sort of solidified when I received the email of the municipal responsibilities. And the biggest one, it seems like we would need to have some authority going forward that would be managing this entity and the operations going forward. And frankly, I think that's going to be hard to create and maintain going forward. So maybe if we can get some of your feedback on the responsibilities under both situations. But I guess I would have to say strongly that I think we should go with LCI to put a point on it.
Let me add to that, Dave, that I think it's going to be a hard sell locally. I may be wrong, but I think if you're going to sell bonds to pay for the broadband network, those have got to be underwritten at the town level, I believe, to go through the bond market. And I mean, they're probably going to be on the hook if this whole thing failed in some manner or another, or whatever. The towns are pretty small, and they're really not used to running, an entity like that. And I think if you're going to go down that road, you've got probably a long haul to reach a point where people are either comfortable with it or decided, nah, we're not going to do it. We're going to do it the other way. I think before we go down that road, we'd be best to see if we can take on LCI, this whole issue with their having to include the cost for a telephone, which is adding, I don't know, $20 a month probably. that most people don't need, or a lot of, as time goes on, less and less people are gonna need. Certainly, the people under 50, they probably have never had a landline. The people our age, will be moving on, and there'll be less and less. And I think the mobile company is looking at the realities of that. Same as Spectrum is looking at the reality of people just moving to streaming and using the Spectrum as an internet connection. So, and to say nothing of the satellite dishes, I think that company is, it's toast. As this stuff really expands. Those are my thoughts.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Mel.
Question for the crowd about the future of Tidewater as a corporate entity, should they not get this fiber build out?
Do you repeat that, Mel?
Basically, what is Tidewater's corporate future if they do not get this fiber build out?
We're only like a fairly not insignificant, but a small percentage of their service area. So, and they already, I think based on the presentation from Mark, LCI doesn't seem to really target residential so much. He seems to think that they're going more after commercial clients. So I don't know if that's.
For the fiber, I think that's correct. At
I
least up to
disagree.
this point.
Yeah.
You disagree? Okay.
No, I think residential, and I think their community, the Twin Villages, is really important to them. And I think that I felt that came across before, but maybe not.
Well, I think of what that means is that they may be willing to talk more about the requirement for a phone line, or having an affordability fund for those people that just need that boost there for the next 2 miles of wire, or to afford their monthly plans. So I don't think we're going to preclude affordability if we went with LCI. And we don't have to create another entity that goes on indefinitely managing internet authority, sort of speak, especially when we have trouble filling our town committees already.
And
I think go ahead.
I was just going to add in, I think Steve said earlier that his bill was somewhere around $180 or $190 a month, including the internet and his television. I've spoken to many people about this, because a lot of people are buying into the bundling that Tidewater is offering, as well as what Spectrum's offering. And a lot of people are not aware that you can unbundle and do much better by just treating the internet as the highway and buying all of your services, like we buy Netflix or we buy Amazon. Also, your basic TV can be purchased at a much lower cost. I happen to use Hulu TV. And when I started, it was about half of what Tidewater was charging. There are other services that are in the teens, $20, $30 range per month to get TV service. So if you're looking at cost and affordability, I think it's advantageous to separate out the services that you put on the internet, that's your choice and your cost, and the basic internet, which is kind of a fixed monthly cost. Just a way to sell it.
Going back to about how LCI sees the two communities, I wasn't at the meeting, but in June, they gave a presentation of their near future plans, which included running a fiber line down the Egypt Road on the eastern side of Down, and then down Shamrock Lane, which is off of Biskie Road, about halfway down. And that's going to pass a lot of homes that are on the main road, but similarly, it's not going to get to the people that we're all obviously looking up. Similarly, like Milliken Island Road, that are long driveways, down long roads that turn into tributaries and spiral in every direction. So I think that they do have a plan to get to the majority of both of our towns, but still the grant money is what's going to get to the finish line to the Milliken Islands of both communities. And then I don't know if they did a similar presentation for Damariscotta in the last year or so. I mean, Newcastle, excuse me.
Is Milliken Island a private road or a town road?
Private.
Is it part of a big subdivision, Carol?
No, it's a private road. It was a camp road
Oh, okay.
years ago, and people remodeled and turned their camps into homes, and then other people built new homes, and there are quite a few families down here.
But whether it's actually a town road is probably immaterial. I mean, if you've got a subdivision that's not a town road, you know, they would have the responsibility of running the line down there in any case, as long as you got more than one house on the drive.
Correct.
I'm not so sure of that. We have a situation in Noblesboro. We have 14 houses down a road, and Tidewater is only willing to deliver the fiber to the town road, not the private road. So the people down that road have been told they can get together and contribute $14,000 to Tidewater, and then Tidewater will wire up those homes. So I think it's very similar to Milliken Island. I wouldn't assume that that Tidewater is going to put any fiber down off Route 2 that's not on 213. Everything else.
Over the years, we've heard that similar conversation with Tidewater and Spectrum, frankly. I do think things have changed.
Well,
I think it's a lot different.
Yeah, I think the contract that they're going to be making, get this whole thing, is that they've got to wire the whole town to every house.
Yep.
And they've got to pay for it as long as if it's a single driveway, they'll take it to the end of the drive and you got to pay for the rest of it. If it's got multi-houses on it and they've got poles and connections and everything now, I think they have, that's the deal they've got to do.
Yeah, and those details will come out in the wash once we hear about the grant window and we have more information on what grant money is going to directly cover, because that was something that Krista mentioned, of more funds for people that are way off the beat, not just for the hookups, but for far off beaten paths, to include that and that includes doing underground burial in places where it's needed. And that was something I would, what was that?
Go ahead and finish. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, that was just from Krista last time, from her experience with the Bremen grant. So we're going to have to see what things have changed on this new grant window, but I think it's going to be more advantageous to us. And I just wanted to jump back to the conversation previously about the cost of hooking people up. There's going to be plenty of people that are right on the roadside that fit within that 100-foot thing, but there's going to be plenty. And I don't think anybody thinks that it's going to be a rosy, easy deal, but there's a large percentage of people that are going to have unforeseen issues. And I can speak to one. My friend lives in Westport. He's just trying to get Spectrum, which he's right on the main road, and the power line is on private property and it's privately owned. And the power line there, the telephone pole isn't tall enough to support the new cable that's going to have to go across the roads, because it's going to slump too low. So they need to spend $8,000 to put in a new pole. Well, I'll tell you right now, when Tidewater gets down to these places and they find a pole that isn't theirs and it's too small, you better have them handcuffed, that they're going to be paying for all of these little poles that you thought, oh, that's no big deal to hook up to. Well, guess what? The whole thing needs to come out, put a whole new one in. And the quote right now from people going is $8,000 for the company to do it. And obviously you can probably find a better deal getting a private person, but that's, there's going to be issues as far as what you thought was going to be, really easy to hook up to.
So can we hear from Andrea? I'm curious of what your thoughts are.
I am mostly concerned about getting power to all the people that really seriously need it. And whatever way that we can do it through using the grant money is, for me, the most important. This is a You know, as a teacher at Lincoln Academy, I have all these children that don't have access to power. And I know that there's a lot of people out there that care about those children. You know, I know we do as communities. So I am listening very carefully to how we're going to go about using the money to the best of our knowledge, to make sure that our people in our community are all served. But I'm still not sure which way we should go.
Okay.
Tom?
Tim?
Or Tim
I
or
mean,
Tom?
Tom, sorry.
Are we deciding to take a next step with the company, or are we deciding to make a recommendation to the select people that they take the next step?
Fair question.
The way I look at it is that we are determining which company, after we reviewed their RFIs, to proceed with. And then we
think
would
At the
continue,
committee level.
we
So
would
then-
continue with the discussions then to produce something that would eventually go back to the select boards.
So then we would then negotiate with the chosen party further.
Right.
Oh, man, this is a
Correct.
lifetime appointment.
I mean, I guess the question I have is, you know, how do we deal with the private, I mean, the public option? Can't really make a decision until you probably know a little bit more about that public option.
What more do you need, George?
What's that?
What more do you need?
Well, you know, if you really want a serious to do it, you're gonna have to hire like Axiom. You're gonna have to have somebody provide actual costs, do the numbers on what the bond issue is gonna be, what issues there are for running it. I mean, we really don't know. We have no idea what we're talking about in terms of $1.3 million. I have no idea.
Does that
If
matter
in
to
fact
you?
they're go-
If it's $1.3 million or $1.5 million, does it matter to you? Hey,
It
would
does
it
if
affect
it's-
your decision? Would it change your decision? Because there's so many other things that we do
Well,
know
I
about.
guess what I'm suggesting is that if we're gonna seriously look at the public option, at least to the point that will be clear when we make the decision, say not to do it, and somebody says, well, why did you make that decision? You have at least enough information to do it.
Okay, that's
we
fair.
could
I
do
think
it-
I think I have enough information, but you may feel
No,
differently,
I
but
do
that's
too,
okay.
but I guess it's something that we as a committee need to be
Yeah.
careful of, because we could put ourselves in the position of
Oh,
making a rash decision that nobody agrees with, or some
I
people.
don't think it's rash.
No, I don't
think it's
either,
rash.
but
Okay,
I'm just-
okay, all right. Well, we all have to have our own, opinion about that. So
I guess
if
the other
you're
thing
not
is,
thinking it's rash, then that's one. It's not rash, and that's two for me too. So I think we've done a pretty good job, pretty thorough job.
We just haven't heard from Matt and Mary Ellen, so maybe if we can hear from both of them. Matt was waving.
Want me to
to
go
me.
ahead? Yeah, just a couple of things here. Yeah, I'm concerned about municipal ownership. The potential cost, I listened to Mark's presentation on Zoom before at Axiom, before I got into this call, but I'm concerned about the potential cost to taxpayers, the general taxpayers, if there's some shortfall with the funding of the project. I don't know what impact a bond would have, a bond for fiber would have on the municipal bond capacity for Newcastle and Damariscotta. Wednesday night, I'm going to talk to my board about a $2 million bond issue. I know that Newcastle had about the same amount in a bond issue for Academy Hill last year. So I'm not sure how that comes into play here. I'm really concerned about a situation where the public sector is competing against the private sector. Just overall, that's more of a philosophical thing where there's two private sector firms that can provide this service, and we'd be competing, with public resources. I do have concern about that. I'm wondering what the impact would be on staffing for the two towns. It's tough to get a new position in the town, no matter, even if we show a revenue source for it. And I'm very concerned about that, particularly as David mentioned, we may need a cable authority. And then I get enough complaints. I don't get a lot, but I get enough for problems with cable service. I really don't want us to be in that business for fiber internet service. I'm thinking that, you've basically got two competitors right here, Axiom with a municipal service, and then LCI. I think we could negotiate with LCI and say, hey, what's the business with this mandatory telephone line? George and I were talking earlier. I had thought they did away with that 1 or 2 years ago, that requirement. But I know that's something from the past that they need to be able to just drop. And then finally, my point is, I think before a firm is selected, that we need to have our respective boards of selectmen, select boards, and on a decision of which firm to go with.
That's a great idea.
Those are my thoughts.
On that mandatory phone service, I believe I'm speaking truthfully here, that LCI would tell you that they would not be able to take $20 or $22 off the bill if they removed it. They apparently get some sort of a subsidy. And so the actual additional cost on your bill is only about $4. And the rest of the 22 is made up by some subsidy that they get from some other source. Unless anybody has any more up-to-date information. But I don't think if they removed it that we would see $20 per household being removed.
I think that's correct.
I
think it's correct that they do get a subsidy based on the number of phone lines that they provide. I think they can definitely, that there must be wiggle room in their pricing structure though, because it's really not in line with what I would have expected to see. Like I say, I think it's more in line with what the market will bear, vis-a-vis the only other competitor that they face in the market, which is Spectrum, whose pricing structure is pretty set. So that's where they're pricing, and that's why they're pricing there. I don't think it's true that they don't have meat on the bone that they could shave. So I think there is room to negotiate.
There are a lot of service providers out there that are charging about $40, $42, $45 a month for what Tidewater is charging $69 for, independent of the phone, just in general.
Mary Ellen, you had other thoughts? I don't think you got to.
I'll try to be brief. Thank you for letting me speak. I do think that the discussion about the municipal ownership has been very helpful, but it's also kind of late in your process. So you've had a lot of momentum. All the work that Tim and Carol and Tom and you guys have done, you're almost ready to possibly submit in the spring or the early months of 2022. So I think it's it's a worthy discussion, and I think that there are examples in Maine where you could learn from how communities are working together, like Baileyville and Calais up there rather. I also think it's a little late in your process. Secondly, you've just heard the town manager of one of the key towns indicating a number of concerns with this model, which tells you that if you're going to try to win over Damariscotta for this decision, that's unlikely to happen. And obviously, I totally respect Matt's view on this. And I think that's just that's a full political reality right here in this moment here. The other thing is, I think the towns do have to be comfortable with it, right? I mean, this is like building a bridge or building a new school. I mean, it does take time, and whether you want to create another great salt-based sanitary district, but have it named the Broadband district, that's going to take time for people to get comfortable with. And I think we're not there yet. And I do think that that could be something down the road when the Frankenstein moment comes in 5 or 10 years from now. But I also think that, so this is just a question, and then I'll turn it back. Are we using the axiom, some of the good axiom points that were made to sort of negotiate and to tweak LCI's proposal? Because I think there still were differences in how they developed their cost proposal and some other things, the installation costs and things like that, the landline, that I think are going to make for a very smart negotiation session down the road. And is that a subject of probably another meeting where we actually take the details a little bit more?
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I mean, I have one thing. Say we take a vote and say, okay, we're only going with LCI. We probably would be smart to make that decision contingent on some negotiations with them, rather than say, okay, we want you guys, however, we want to get these prices down.
Sure.
Well, you know,
I think it's complete. Yeah, it's completely contingent, at least for any public investment from each of the towns. As far as, because if they're not willing to wiggle room, then there's no point of putting a single dollar of, the municipal public money, and then they can just hunt for the state grants. Because if they're not going to move on the pricing, then from a municipal standpoint, if I was a voting member, I wouldn't vote to give them a red cent. As draconian as that may sound.
Well, and also I know Mal wanted to say something, but I think Mark's presentation was, to me, it was pretty clear that if they were going to come in and help us, we are looking at over 2 years, maybe 3, before that they could get us up and running for the Newcastle and Damariscotta. So I think the advantage of LCI is that, they already have a pretty good presence here. They have a lot of infrastructure. I think a lot of those poles already have fiber on them that they're running in the, like up to 13 places like that. And I think that Alan mentioned that in his presentation, that once the money came in, it sounded to me like they would be able to move faster. But then we also have supply, and we also have the staffing that they would need to do the work.
Do you think that's true, Evan?
Which part?
That LCI can move faster?
Oh, I think anybody can move faster with the right dollar amount. I don't know if between the two towns, we have that right dollar amount to make people drop everything and turn around.
Well, I feel like we don't have time to wait years to get fiber optics to everyone. We don't have that luxury. We want our town to be welcoming people and to move here, to work remotely, to do whatever that we need to do to have our community successful. And our local people must have access today. In today's world, we can't have people without internet. It's not logical. And I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't do something, but I do know that we can't afford to just sit back and let this go really slowly. This is why we're meeting. We need to be proactive. I understand that.
Yeah, I think we all agree. I think that's why we're all here, right?
We've got a lot more in common than we do have differences. I'll tell you that much. It's one thing I like to say when we get through debates like this in any forum.
So I have one small question. That when I was listening to Mark's presentation, he said something about $30,000 being needed for both towns in order for him to start engaging in planning. And so I think that's part of why he was thinking that you guys are down the road a bit before you submit any applications. So was that what you took away from what he was saying about how Axiom would jump into the process if he was selected?
Yeah,
I took it as a potential step backwards, and that having to do some of the planning that we got the grant in conjunction with the feasibility study for Tidewater. So, we would have to sort of step back and recreate that feasibility study. So
he wasn't aware how far along we were in our process. We didn't share that with him.
Yeah, I don't even know. He didn't seem to understand that LCI was really involved in the town as far as fiber went.
Right.
Is the feasibility study that we have with Tidewater ours? I mean, we could give it to any contractor that we work with, or is it proprietary in some way that?
I don't know.
Well, it
That's
was
a good
paid,
question.
paid for with
Distributing.
public money, so should be access to freedom of information.
But they
Although I
did
think
ask to
Tide-
keep it quiet until they were selected
Sure.
Right.
to be
And we
provider.
still haven't even got the full thing anyway, so.
Well, that's, yeah, no.
But,
Okay.
and I think Mary Ellen is right, is maybe the proper course forward would be, is to say that we want to pursue it more with LCI, but say, look, these questions came up by reviewing Axiom's proposal and see if they want to give us more information that will solidify things. Or as George said, accept it with contingencies that they provide that information. But I think as a path moving forward focused on LCI makes the most sense.
I feel like we're shopping without a price tag on everything, right? We
Mhm.
don't really know what anything is going to cost here from either side. And it just seems like bad consumer behavior to be making decisions without knowing what you're on the hook for. So I'm really kind of uncomfortable with listen, I really am sympathetic to the need of the community to move forward and get everyone fiber as quickly as possible. But there are some realities. We need to do financial due diligence. We need
Mhm.
to make sure that we really understand the marketplace. And you've got to understand there are supply chain issues like getting conduit now. Conduit is hugely expensive and hard to get. So if LCI is going to lay conduit, I'm sure that they have some sort of access, but my electrician, it took him 6 months
Mhm.
to get the conduit for my house. So I don't believe anybody's going to be, fully lit up in this town on any new infrastructure that we're building in 2023. I don't think that's going to happen, or 2022, maybe summer 2023, regardless of whether it's LCI or Axiom. So I think we just need to be careful with our expectations in that regard. I want it to go fast too, but I don't believe it's going to.
Mal?
I think,
I agree. We don't have the dollars yet, and I think I'm frustrated that we haven't had the information yet from LCI that they committed to weeks ago. So that's a frustration.
Do
Let
we
me
have
just
any
add
better
something
sense?
from-
Hold on, we got to let Mal get in here. He's raised his hand
Oh, yeah,
4
that's
times.
right.
Give this guy a shot.
Just a member of the public here. Earlier, there was some comment about bonding and whether towns would be interested in or willing to consider that kind of thing. And the issue of the Lincoln Academy bond is brought up. That was a pass-through bond where the town didn't even have any obligations. It's a weird legal situation, but you're basically just putting your name on this passage of bank money to a nonprofit of the right type, and it has to be adequately separated from the town. And if you had a multi-town entity, nonprofit entity running this, you would have to set up a shell, which is sort of in David's world, that would be, well, it might even be a quasi-municipal corporation. It could be a separate not-for-profit corporation, but it might well qualify for pass-through bonding without obliging the towns. But that's a lawyer question and a good lawyer who specializes in that issue.
We do have a motion from Tom to move that the committee further discussion for fiber to the premise and ISP provision in Newcastle and Damariscotta solely with LCI.
Has that been seconded?
It has not.
I'll second it.
All right, we'll open the floor. We've had quite a discussion, but we'd like to have a vote. All those in favor of moving ahead with LCI? If you want to raise your hand or put your thumbs up on the thing.
And by moving forward, you mean to gain more additional information?
Start
Well,
negotiations.
Right, I'm
Start
considering that this is the person that, in my mind, this is who you're selecting from the RFI
Yes.
to keep going down the rabbit hole. So we've got 1, 2, we've got, sorry, the camera's just moved. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least, and 6. Mel?
I'm not a member. I'm just
Oh,
public
I
watching.
thought you were a member all this time. My
Nope.
mistake.
Oh,
And then all opposed. So I believe that was 6 or 7 to nothing, depending on which way we look at it.
The only, if I could, the only thing I'd
6,
add
7 to
is
1.
that I think we need to go to our respective boards of selectmen, and because you're far enough along in the process where you're making a decision on one firm over another. I think it would be appropriate to get the public decision made.
I would totally agree with that. I think that's clearly a step that needs to happen very soon. I want to say, though, that what this motion says is further discussion with. It doesn't say that we have selected them as the final provider. It's that next step to say, let's now
We're
do
gonna
this
keep working with,
negotiation to
yeah.
see
yes.
what you can do for us.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree with that 100%. And I think that we need to keep it still a little bit, I don't want to say covered up, but closed. We don't want the word to get out, excuse me, that we've selected LCI. Because that can happen very quickly if we have discussions, at town meetings or among, participants or whoever. I think we want to keep LCI on the hook as long as we can, as at the same time moving quickly. But they can't think, and others can't think that we've selected them.
I totally agree. We
Yeah.
cannot let that happen.
So Matt, with all due respect, I say we got a little bit more work to do. We got to go at LCI kind of real hard here, real quick, and see what they do. See whether they're willing to be partners or not. They said they wanted to be. Let's see. Let's see if some of these things that we've been, hashing over for months and weeks and
Right.
is real.
First and foremost is the feasibility study that was promised us quite a long time ago.
Yep.
Well, also,
But-
Tim, I think I agree with you about where you guys are with respect to LCI. I would take that only so far because the selectmen themselves and Matt may have some other things, considerations that they want to add to the negotiation mix. So again, I think perhaps between Matt and you guys, you can work that out. But just when we all think it's all tied up with the bows and ribbons, the selectmen might go, well, what about this? What about that? So I think we can take it so far, but I think
No,
that
I'm just suggesting we need one more kick at the
Yep,
can
okay.
before we get to that point. I'm not saying this should be, we should try to, put a bow on this thing before Matt and Dave take it to their teams. But I just think we need to get, we spent a lot of time debating Spectrum, Axiom, LCI. Now I think we've got one. Let's look them in the eye now and see what they got.
Who wants to formulate all these ideas that we're going to propose to LCI to come on the table with? I'm not good in that respect, but who would like to?
I can make a
how
list.
do we do that? Us as a whole committee sitting around with them, or I really
Yes.
don't know.
I can definitely put it all together if everybody wants to send input directly to me, and then we can.
I second that.
I agree.
So
I sort of like Steve's PowerPoint, so
Right.
very well organized.
So my one question is, we have January 7th, this Friday, as the deadline for us to announce that we've selected somebody from the RFI to continue going work with. What format would you like me to just communicate that to LCI? Or, because it just sounded like you guys did not want a press release.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But at any rate, the grant window supposedly is going to open next week, so we're starting to get behind the
Let it
eight
go.
ball.
Is that for just a planning or?
This is
a
for the
building?
big, this is it.
The
On-
infrastructure, right?
On the 12th, we'll know
Yeah.
if and when, and by all intents, that's what the rumor mill is bringing up, that they're opening the window on the 12th.
Evan,
So I
that's
guess
if
the answer to your question depends on how quick Alan can get the feasibility study to us.
Correct.
and how
You-
quickly we can get input to him on the areas that we've been talking about, phones and 100 feet versus 200 feet and all those cost issues. I mean, Evan, you've received quite a bit of input, I think up to this point. Maybe a little dusting, maybe it can be put into a pretty quick email to Alan here in the next couple of days. Is that asking too much?
No, I think we can get ahead with that. Do you guys, we talked about moving the meeting structure back to second and fourth Mondays. I think we can assume that since we've met almost 3 weeks in a row, I think we could skip the 10th and move the next meeting to the 24th. That way we would know what's going on the 12th, and then at least some feasible action with the state will have happened by then, so we'll have more to talk about.
And we can still communicate with email and
Yep.
if we find we have to have a meeting, we could do that.
And I know personally, I will start communicating with the select board members to get a general feel of their thoughts on this side of the river. And Matt, if you could do the same to.
And I plan on attending is there a Newcastle meeting this week or next week?
Second Mondays next week.
Next week. So I'll plan on attending the Newcastle meeting, and then I'm going to the Damariscotta one this Wednesday too, to
Right.
discuss.
I mean,
And-
their thoughts and concerns, especially. We want to know, if they're going to pull the rug out from under us, we need to know that PDQ.
Yeah.
I
And
get the
Evan, you're,
sense, though, that they know that we're doing a lot of work and they may not want to undo that. So.
Right. And Evan, I think you can say to LCI, as you know, we're talking multi-figure, 6-figure plus here. So we look forward to working with you.
Evan, you are a direct contact to Alan, correctly?
Yep.
Correct? Yeah, okay, so I thought, you've got your thumb
So-
on him.
Evan, I got my hand up just when there's a chance I could put in.
Go
2
ahead.
cents. Well, I was just gonna comment. I know, from some of the comments on the call, that there's an interest in having things done quickly. Let me give you an example in Noblesboro. This is LCI data that we have roughly 1/3 of the of the houses that LCI says are served are actually connected. So 2/3 that are by their data served are not yet connected to the fiber. We have people in that 2/3 that are calling Tidewater and saying, connect me. And the answer that Tidewater is given is, it's going to take so long to connect you, you might want to try Spectrum. Believe it or not. Okay. So what we're being told is, now there are some people, we're asking Tidewater, why don't you market to those 2/3? They said, we have so much work that if we market it to them and they want it, we can't give it. We can't get it to them. This would be down anywhere from 250 feet to whatever. So for the desire to have things quickly, at this point, I don't see LCI being able to serve. I mean, they've got Bremen, they've got Newcastle, Damariscotta. Noblesboro is very much in the same place as this committee is. We're probably going to be leaning toward LCI for the same reason that you folks are. So I think part of the discussion has to be, how are you going to take the time that it's going to take to connect and have it? What's it going to take? And, you know, that when Mark Ouellette told us how they get stuff built, they have outside contractors who do the build out. Axiom really doesn't have any people who do the build. It's all done by outside contractors. Well, maybe
So is
LCI,
LCI, yeah.
maybe LCI needs to get in bed with some of those contractors. They probably do some, but maybe they have to do more. So the same concerns exist here. Is everybody's going to lean on LCI in these neighboring towns, and they're just not going to be able to deliver.
Well, Alan shared
that's
that
true,
they
and
do
it's-
use contractors. Yeah.
And it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. You're absolutely right. So we have to move quickly, but, you know, smartly. And back to your original comment, Alan told us that they're no longer responding to those one-offs that you described, and because they're so busy with these big projects like similar to ours. So it's probably why they got that reaction.
Yeah.
So I'll contact Alan. Do you want to try and have him here for the January the 24th?
Yeah.
Yes,
some
I think
nods.
that'll be helpful.
Okay, will be.
But I think in between time, there's,
Yep.
is possible to have a, you know, sit down with them in person, kind of hammer out this stuff, and instead of waiting until the 24th. And you know, I think there can be some back and forth. You
Yeah, I
said you were
agree.
gonna put
I
together
agree.
some thoughts and send it off to them, and they can respond.
Yeah, maybe we should plan it out like this. We get the feasibility study, so then we have what they're calling their numbers. Then we actually have the figures that we want to deal with. We can try and estimate what I think they'll probably have an estimate of what they think the state's going to give to them in a grant if found successful. And then what I would imagine that they have a soft number that they'd like to see to make this all happen more cleanly. But I don't know. So I think, yeah, probably in this next week, we'll get that information. We'll have our questions to be able to submit it. And then it all depends on how, when and where and who we want to have this discussion with probably both Alan and Randall, because we want to have real decision makers in the room, not just canned heat.
Yep.
So it's all, yeah, we're 3 weeks out from the 24th. So it's just a matter of figuring out the schedule. Should we try and make a soft commitment right now or wait for a week for some more info?
I think
We also
really
have the
need to
grant
have the
that-
feasibility study in our hands
Yep.
before we can.
And we have
say
the grant
anything.
coming up too.
Right.
Yep, so there's a workshop on there's a workshop on January 19th. So I'm thinking Evan's gonna be there, and anyone else is welcome to attend the Connect Me workshop on the 19th.
Do you get the link? Do you email them directly, the executive Peggy, or?
They haven't sent out any more information about the workshop yet, Evan, so
Okay.
hopefully.
So probably the 12th, people will know what they want to ask, and then, yeah, the next week will be yep. Okay.
Evan, can you accumulate some LCI negotiation items in the meantime?
Yep.
Either from already been submitted or requests from the team, anything else that they think we want to put in front of LCI at the appropriate time?
I can obviously think of the big ones that we've just talked about, but there may be some one hits that I haven't even thought of, and you guys might not think of tomorrow until you're in the shower coming up with another idea.
Yeah, send them to you then, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Look forward to it.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the discussion.
Yes, fantastic. I'll get in touch with Alan, and we'll keep putting the hammer down to get the feasibility study that's been out for 3 months now.
Great.
All right. Until
Thank
then,
you.
see you on email, and then the 24th will be the next meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Now,
Bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Cheers.